Brandon Graham with NAMI's Advocacy and Public Policy team. I hope that you'll continue today's celebration by joining us to pledge to vote for mental health during this year's elections. The decision on who to vote for is yours and yours alone, but taking the pledge to vote for mental health says that mental health should be a key policy issue during our elections. Elections matter, especially for millions of people with mental health conditions. So please visit www.votefor4mentalhealth.org and take the pledge to vote for mental health and learn more about why your vote for mental health matters.
CareSource is a proud sponsor of the National Alliance on Mental Illness Walks Your Way, a virtual event. CareSource is a multi-state health plan administering Medicaid and offering insurance through the health insurance marketplace, Medicare Advantage, and dual eligible programs.
Hello, everyone. My name is Treday Moore, and I am the Development Specialist and Walk Manager with NAMI Georgia. And today, I would like to welcome you to our NAMIWalks Your Way Q&A. Here with me today is Dr. LaCleisha Izzard, Licensed Professional Counselor and Mental Health Professional, and Dr. Maurice Cassell, Behavioral Health Specialist, who are both a part of the NAMI Georgia Cultural Diversity Committee. Today, I would like to begin this forum by just giving them a chance to let us know what mental health means to them and why they do what they do in their fields.
I'll let Dr. Izzy go, the amazing Dr. Izzy. Go ahead.
I sure will. I will take it away. Thanks, Dr. Cassell. Thanks, Treday, for that great introduction.
Yes.
But mental health just means so many things to me, you all, just to be honest. Mental health is my gift. I do know that. I have been in the field of mental health, I know, almost 20 years now, probably a little longer than that, because I started out as a special education teacher working with middle school age children, adolescents with behavior and emotional disorders. And that's really when I discovered, I believe, my passion for mental health. Didn't yet know at the time that it was my gift until after I pursued my master's in mental health counseling. But definitely mental health to me, number one, means your well-being of state of mind and of emotions. But then on the other side of that is understanding any challenges and conditions that you may have with your mental health and being open to seek the assistance or the counseling or the services needed so that you can function appropriately mentally and emotionally. NAMI is an amazing part of my life because I like the vision and the mission of NAMI. I sit on the board of directors for NAMI Georgia and have already just been a part of so many amazing services and activities that NAMI does. So I have full support for NAMI, and I'm looking forward to learning more and having more years with them.
Thank you, Dr. Izzard.
For me, I love to tell the story of my journey with mental health. For me, it started in New York City, in the Northeast region, working with students and at-risk kids. And as I worked with them in a local church, actually, and that's where it started, and I was volunteering, serving in a local church. And as I worked with these students and their families, I just felt like I was not equipped to handle the prevailing needs that they were facing. Of course, I went on to become a middle school and high school teacher, working with students. But even at that point, I just felt like something more was missing. And I wanted to come alongside them as they face those maladaptive issues, those crisis issues, particularly being labeled urban at-risk kids, right? There are a lot of risk factors that they face. So I went on to get a second master's in counseling and then a PhD in counseling so that I could come alongside those who are managing, and I like to use those words, managing coping and navigating mental health conditions. So for me, that's what mental health means. It means coming alongside those who are managing what they're facing and kind of helping them with hope and resiliency. Those are the two words. So that's what mental health means to me. It also means, and I love to say this, which we know, Dr. Izzy, is it's helping to tear down the stigma of mental health and mental illness by explaining that mental illness is no different than a medical illness. So that's been my passion for the last few years, last number of years, is really helping to tear down the stigma, the silence, the shame of mental health and mental illness.
Thank you very much. Well, since you all have shared, I will also take a turn letting everyone know what mental health means to me. I actually studied psychology from Tuskegee University, and it was the most amazing tenure in my life because mental health isn't really talked about in African American communities. And I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, and it was something that I knew that was very prevalent and something that I felt as if we should be focused on and honed in on, but no one in my family ever discussed what mental health meant. No one in my schools really discussed, that there were children who dealt with mental health issues. And so it was something that I felt like I had to become a part of in order to not only better myself, but all of the people around me. And so to me, mental health is everything. Because if your brain doesn't work right, nothing else will work correctly.
Right.
And I don't think people take the time to really comprehend what that means. So we will start this Q&A off by just asking a few questions regarding mental health, minorities, and communities. So the very first question that I have for you all today would be, what steps do you all believe that we would need to take in order to get, as a community, in order to support mental health?
Want me to go first again, Dr. Cassell?
Sure, I'll let you go first. Maybe the next round I'll go first. How about that?
Well, we can stay in this order. It's fine. Today, that it really is a powerful question and an important question. But I think even before we even look at steps, I think it's so important to realize that minorities have to have a seat at the table. And what I really mean by having a seat at the table is that they must be present in these different community-based organizations and in leadership roles in these community-based organizations. But not only having a seat then at the table and being present, but then being able to eat. And then what that means is being able to be a person who is responsible for making certain decisions related to the minority population. Because again, how are you going to be effective in working with minorities if you do not have a minority that is representative? And then also if you cannot allow that person of that minority to make some of the challenging decisions based upon those minorities, because they have the actual lived experience and then may also very well have the wisdom and the intellect that is needed to support that minority community. So I think we must first look at that before we get into even specific steps as it relates to the communities helping minorities. First, making sure there's a representation, having a seat at the table, eating, by then being able to be responsible for making some of these major choices and decisions. And I'll let Dr. Cassell take over for the steps that he thinks are important.
Oh, I so agree with Dr. Izzy on that. One of the things, I've been advocating for in our field, and I know Dr. Izzy, you're doing that as well as Trade, is really making sure that we are visibly represented at the table. So I really want to affirm and highlight that. One of the thoughts that came to my mind is, as it relates to the minority community, it is important that community feels a sense of, I see you, I hear you, I value you, and I mourn with you. And that's really important, that this community would feel like, we're seen, we're heard, we're valued, and you are journeying with us and mourning with us. The other thought, as it relates to working with minority communities, I think it's so important, particularly in this climate that we're living in, that we understand clearly that there are several contexts for change and several pathways to healing. And what I mean by that is, so often people will say, well, as it relates to what's happening in the community, they'll focus on one aspect of change, but please know that there are several contexts for change and many pathways to healing, included advocacy, awareness, education, conversation, marching, protesting, posting, policy making. Those are all avenues for change. And we really want to highlight that, particularly in this climate. And I love to say it this way: we cannot legislate someone's passion or someone's morality. So as we deal with the minority communities, let's keep that in mind.
Well said. Mhm.
Thank you very much. Those were very great answers. It actually leads me into my next question as to what do you both believe are some of these major factors that do have the greatest impact? You, Dr. Izzy, mentioned having a seat at the table and just kind of being able to eat alongside in a synonymous environment. And Dr. Cassell, you mentioned just the different factors and what you believe as far as hope and healing and advocacy. What do you feel are the greatest benefits or the greatest impacts that factor into those?
And I'll start with that one as well. For me, looking at some of the major factors as it relates to impact on our minority community and mental health is number one is tearing down the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
We really have to get to the place of erasing that stigma in minority communities. And so again, looking at steps and how you start to do that is the awareness piece. So that's one of the reasons why I love being involved with NAMI so much, because NAMI does a phenomenal job with awareness, okay? Really getting awareness out there. And then just as Dr. Cassell said, the advocacy piece is so essential, because the more that we're advocating for minority communities, the more that we're advocating for mental health, the more still that the awareness gets out there and the services are available to them as well. So number one, stigma. We have to erase that through that awareness and through that knowledge. That is so critical. And then we even have to start looking at our minority communities, their environment, such as economic injustice, okay? And so if you have a minority who's in a community that's poverty stricken, okay, again, where are they going to get the funds? Where are they going to get the resources from to understand more about mental health and how to get the assistance and the help that they need? I can't tell you the number of clients and parents that I've worked with who are at that place where their social economic status is low and they're in communities where you just don't see many individuals of wealth or just many individuals that even have a good working, based job. And so many of them are left behind because of that. And many of them, they know nothing about NAMI. They know nothing about some of these available and free programs. So again, being mindful that these are some of the communities that we have to be intentional about going in and helping them to understand what's really going on as it relates to mental health and as it relates to awareness. Sometimes that means collaborating with our faith-based organization, our churches, so that we can get the word out, because many of them we know will attend church or they will go to church sometimes for resources. And so sometimes that's the place for them to get the knowledge and the information about mental health and the resources that are available to them. One of the last pieces as it relates to some of the major factors are insurance and some of the difficulties that we may have with the parity issues that we're experiencing and some of the services that are not as available, okay, with certain insurance. Okay, so if we're looking even at Medicaid, if we're looking at different high deductible insurance plans, all of these things can still be a major factor in if whether or not minorities in these different communities are getting what they need as it relates to mental health.
Excellent. Again, want to piggyback, because the more we hear it said, the more the word gets out and the more the stigma will be reduced, right? It's this idea of awareness, and we really want to highlight that. We want to trumpet that particularly in minority communities, we want to get the awareness piece out, right? And that helps to reduce the stigma. What the research shows, and NAMI is, of course, the leader in that, is that African Americans and Hispanics, they access mental health half the rate of our white counterparts. So think about that, right? Asian Americans, 1/3 the rate. And a big piece of that is what's happening with the stigma and the silence and the shame, right? So we want to get the word out. Some other factors that come to mind that we want to be aware of is we've found in minority communities, African Americans, brown communities, and the list goes on, urban communities, is there is often misdiagnosis, right? So in the community, we find that there's often a misdiagnosis of conditions. It's labeled something when it's other things, right? Not only misdiagnosis, but I'll say it this way, overdiagnosis, right? We'll use that word. We are overdiagnosed as well. And the other thing is in the minority community, it's we're often overly medicated, right? So quite often you'll find in the community when we see clients, when we see patients, right, they'll come in and as we're helping with medication management, we're finding that, right, that they're on a lot of medication, a lot of polypharmaceutical challenges is what they're facing because again, they're misdiagnosed, they're overdiagnosed, and they're overly medicated. The other piece of that is limited access to these services. So we want to get the word out, as Dr. Izzy was mentioning earlier, is we want to get the word out that there are free services available in our communities. NAMI, we can't say enough about the work that NAMI does in providing support, resources, advocacy, training, education, family support. The list goes on and on. So let's reduce the stigma, let's reduce the silence and the shame, and letting our community know that we have access, despite what the research is saying.
Absolutely. And I just want to piggyback on that just one more time, especially now, because
Yes.
we are in a mental health crisis
Yes,
and we
yes,
are in a health pandemic. So
yes.
now, even more than ever, we have to be intentional about this awareness and making sure that some of our minority communities are aware of the resources that are out there and that are available to them, and teaching them about the value of seeking this support. It's one thing to give somebody a number or give somebody a hotline, but you
Mhm.
have to be intentional about helping them to understand how calling this number, how going to this support group can really be effective in supporting them with whatever mental health challenges or conditions or their loved one or family member is having. Because it may not even be that they have a mental health
Mhm.
challenge, but it could be someone that they love. But they need to learn for themselves what that's all about so that they can be a
Yes.
better support to their family members.
Dr. Izzy, listen, I don't want to leave that. Uh, you're getting me started right there, right? But especially during these times, right? What the research is showing is that the next great pandemic will be the of a mental health pandemic, is what they're labeling it as, right? We've seen that at NAMI, that the numbers have shifted, right? Prior to the pandemic and the economic downturn and the racial inequities and all the challenges that's happening there, 1 in 4 Americans were experiencing a mental health condition. Now we're seeing that it's 1 in 3, right? So especially right now, we want to get the word out, and those who are watching and who'll be listening, uh, particularly in our communities, right? Get the word out. Uh, let our communities, let our families know that we have support, because coming out of this pandemic, which we will, we're going to go into a mental health pandemic, and we want to be proactive. And I love what you said, and intentional, right? And making sure that we have those supports ahead of getting into that next great pandemic.
Wow. Thank you both so much for all of that amazing insight. I really appreciate it. As I'm sure both of you are aware, individuals who experience mental health problems account for 56% of state prisoners, 45% of federal prisoners, and 64% of jail inmates. Do you believe that the stigma surrounding mental health has impacted this, and this is due to it? and how these individuals are perceived?
Absolutely, Trade. And coming from to the mental health background, I've also worked in corrections. I've also worked with the military population. So I'm very much so aware of how these specific cultures,
Mhm.
as it relates to mental health, how they interact. Okay. Because corrections is a completely different culture of its
Mhm.
own. Military is a completely different culture of its own. And so when they experience mental health challenges, it is very unique. Okay. And so it is a specialty area for practitioners such as
Yes.
myself.
Mhm.
And so it does make a difference how you approach these individuals. So, one of the first things I would say as it relates to working with that population and understanding more about these percentages is that these individuals, they need to be made to feel more supported. Okay. When they enter into specific programs, such as when they come out of incarceration, such as the mental health courts, the diversion courts, what are some of the accountability courts, all of these different systems have to really show them that they are really there to support them and to help them, and this is not just a process kind of to just go through. So that support must be there. They must be able to see it. The resources, of course, need to be there. The
Right.
connections such as NAMI need to be
Right.
presented to them up front, and helping them again to understand, not just giving a pamphlet, but
Right.
helping them to really understand how these programs and how these resources can benefit them. How is it that mental health court benefits them? How is it that accountability court benefits them? How is it that diversion court?
Mhm.
What are the specific things that will really help them to progress in their life and to be able to move to the next level? Because what you don't want to happen to this population, number one, if you have an inmate that has a mental health challenge, you don't want them to come out with double stigma. And what
Yeah.
that means is
Wow.
stigma because I'm an inmate, stigma because I have
Wow.
a mental health challenge. Okay. And so that's why the support piece surrounding them is so essential, because they're already feeling some shame because of the label of being a criminal or being a convict. Okay.
Wow.
So that support is going to be essential, along with some of those resources like mental health court, accountability court, diversion court, and then NAMI coming alongside. That's why collaboration is
That's
always
it.
key. Collaboration is always key, because if these courts are collaborating with NAMI, collaborating with other mental health
Mhm.
professionals and other support groups within our community, then it makes a safety net and a safety haven so that these individuals can then thrive, and not then what they call being institutionalized and going back into the system.
Wow. Good. I so agree with Dr. Izzy. As you mentioned that question, what came to my mind was I'd like to rehearse the narrative by former police chief Brown out of Dallas, and his narrative was, "We ask the cops to do too much."
Mm.
Now, in this climate, for me to say that already, those who are watching, that may trigger some thoughts or some passions of your own. But I'd like to echo those sentiments, because I do believe that we often ask the justice system, police officers, first responders, we ask them to do too much. We're asking them to police, we're asking them to be mental health workers, we're asking them to respond to every crisis. And somebody's saying, well, that's their job, right? And it is their job to police and all the other stuff that they do. But I want to really echo that what Dr. Izzy said is so important. This is where collaborative work comes into play. This is where it's most critical that we give the support to the justice system so that they can do the work that they need to do, right? Because if the support is not there, we're going to re-victimize, re-traumatize, and like you said, Dr. Izzy, we're going to add more stigma when they leave. So I really want to highlight that, particularly again in this climate when there's a lot of narratives out there about what should we do with police. And I'm not here to attack the police or to overly support the police. I'm saying from a mental health perspective, let's give the police officers the support that they need through organizations like NAMI and through clinicians like ourselves, so that they can do the work that they do. A quick story, and then I'll move on. Is one of my roles at NAMI is I teach the CIT program. So I sit with the police officers, right? I spend quite a bit of time working with the police officers, and that's amazing because think about it. You have an African American guy that is often sent into the most rural parts of Georgia. When I say rural, I mean rural. Do you see how I'm leaning into the camera, right? I'm from New York, right? I'm a city boy, right? But I get sent into the most rural parts of Georgia, and I sit with police officers. And what's happening through NAMI is we are helping to empower, to equip, and educate those police officers and sheriff's departments in how to manage those mental health conditions. So I can't say enough about NAMI and the work that we're doing to really, change the stigma and change the narrative and change some of those numbers that we're seeing. Quick story, I was teaching in CIT program again in one of the most rural. Did I say rural enough? And I was the only, of course, I think it was one stoplight in the town. There wasn't even a McDonald's in the town. I'm setting the picture up. I'm a great storyteller. So I was teaching the police officers, and I had one of the most profound and life-changing moments for myself and the police officers while I was teaching. While we were teaching about de-escalation, I paused and I did an exercise where I put my hand, like I'm doing now, in my inner pocket. And I said to the police officers, what do you see when you see my hand go in the pocket? Now, again, African-American guy, right? Immediately the hands went up and they said, we see a weapon. My response was, and here's how the story, really took a great turn. My response was, well, in New York City, where I'm from, sometimes African-American youth will reach into their pockets and pull out a hairbrush as a means of coping. And this is what the police officers said. We did not know that. We are trained to see a weapon. And then they said something else, which was really important. They said it's important to understand that when we go into a crisis situation, if we don't take care of that crisis situation, the community will come down on us and say, why did you not take care of that situation? What's the point I want to make with that as we talk about incarceration and the police officers? This is where education is so important. I was educated and the police officers were educated. So NAMI, we are doing a great job in helping to shift those numbers, because in that moment, and by the way, I said this to them, I said, this is quite scary for me to do this, because where I grew up, right, my encounters with police officers were often negative. So even doing this in front of the police officers was also triggering for me. So I hope I answered that question, but I thought it was a really profound and deep moment. And it's a moment that we need to highlight so that we can add to the conversation about the importance of education and educating those who are in the justice system.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add one program that is doing a great job with helping us in this area, and that is the Stepping Up Initiative. And what their primary mission is taking a major stand to help decrease the number of incarcerated individuals in the jails with mental health challenges. Okay. So we have some great programs that are out there that are collaborating with NAMI. One of our fellow board members, Mr. Bill Carruthers, he's very active with the Stepping Up Initiative even now, currently to this day. So if you want to learn more about that, feel free to reach out to him or reach out to NAMI. We can get you the resources and the connections that you need to learn more about the Stepping Up Initiative as well.
Thank you very much. I've actually participated in the CIT youth training, and I
Yes.
just want to give you a shout out, Dr. Cassell, because you are an amazing instructor, and I would like to I would like to let everyone know that if you're just looking for the experience, I think that it's very worth it. It opened my eyes to a lot of different avenues that I wasn't even looking into when it came to mental health and how to properly assist in a situation of that nature. So I highly suggest you taking one of these courses. My next question, I would like to direct it towards you first, Dr. Cassell, because it focuses on youth and adults. And so, do you feel as if effective mental health approaches to meet people at where they are synonymous for adults and youth?
A great question. That's actually an area that is a passion of mine in terms of research. My research and my dissertation was in that very area, is finding effective interventions, particularly for urban youth. And what the research, in my researching and discovery showed is that there's very limited research and interventions for youth, number one, and number two, for urban minority youth. So to respond to your question, right, there's the resources are so limited and the research is so limited that I do want to advocate that we encourage people, we encourage clinicians, we encourage mental health workers to really begin to develop specific interventions and resources that target youth, because what we saw in the research is that oftentimes we're using interventions and approaches that is geared towards adults and does not translate or transport to a youth community, much more an urban youth or a minority community. So it is not synonymous. We don't see that there is effective interventions and approaches and research for both. So hopefully I answered that question.
Yes, thank you.
You did, and I agree. Absolutely no. Yeah, they're not synonymous. And it is just like Dr. Cassell said, because our minority populations, especially African American youth males,
There you go.
okay, is a very unique population. I'm actually doing a continuing education presentation for Mental Health America of Georgia this Friday on Black male youth and the racial injustices and inequalities that they experience within our communities. So again, we know that that population is very unique. And so that means that approaches for them and interventions, what I like to call culturally competent interventions,
That's it.
are needed for that population. And when I did the research for this presentation, Dr. Cassell and Truday, I really found some interesting things that I think I knew, but it was just to see it in black and white, it just took a different toll on me. And so for our young African American males, what the research said is, number one, they don't trust mental health professionals. They don't trust them. Okay. And the other piece of that is there is somewhat of a stigma that's there
Right.
too, because they don't want to go in and they don't want to appear weak, or they don't want to appear that they can't do this on their own. Many of them are in single parent homes, so they're
Right.
still considered to be the man of the household.
Right.
Okay. And so they want to appear strong, that they can handle this, that they got this. They may have younger siblings that are under them. And so all of that plays a factor in the treatment and interventions and approaches with not just, of course, African American male youth, but other minorities as well.
That's
We
right.
have to really be able to understand their culture and also understand their challenges in order for us to be able to develop and to step outside of the box so that there are creative interventions for them. But one of the areas that I know that really work well with African American male youth is mentorship.
Yes.
Okay. because mentorship can get them to seeking professional counseling or professional help. I have an uncle in North Carolina. He has a program called Fatherhood Program,
Hmm.
where he goes into some of these rural communities and he helps to do parent training and
Hmm.
educational training to these African American male young fathers,
So,
okay, and helping them to learn how to be effective fathers. But it's more still of a mentoring and training program, because usually they feel more comfortable going
so,
through something like this first, and then you can talk to them more about counseling and how it can be beneficial and how it can help. And it's also important to know that when you're looking at mentorship, again, just as the research says, that when
hmm.
African Americans seek professional help, they usually want someone that looks like them. Okay.
Right.
It's the same with African American male youth in mentoring programs. They
Hmm.
want an African American male man, because, I mean, an African American male, because they
Hmm.
understand that this individual understands my challenges, understands my issues, understands my lived experiences.
Uh, and I want to highlight something as well, Dr. Izzy and Trede, is a specific area that I'm most passionate about as we talk about interventions and approaches and mental health conditions. It's what's called subsyndromal conditions. And what that is, so often when we talk about mental health conditions, it's often those who are diagnosed, right? With a condition, whether it's generalized anxiety disorder, and the list goes on and on. But what I know from working with this community, that many deal with subsyndromal conditions, and what that means is it might not meet criteria for being diagnosed as a condition, but it's impacting their lives, right? And particularly urban youth and minority youth, when we did the research, right? Many were dealing with anxiety issues, depression concerns, traumatic experiences, but it was not diagnosed because it didn't meet criteria. So hence they were not getting the help that they needed. So I want to highlight that we also want to be aware of, just by virtue of being a minority, an urban kid, a Hispanic kid, being in urban communities or minority communities, we may be dealing with conditions that are not diagnosed on the spectrum, and they often get overlooked. And the kids that I worked with for my particular research, they were dealing with things like an incarcerated parent, single parent homes. They were responding to questions and saying things like, I fear for my life. I fear that I'm going to get shot today, right?
Mm.
But they were not getting the help that they needed because they were not diagnosed on the spectrum or on the scale, or showing up on the GAD scale, or the any of those other intervention tools. So keep that in mind. And I also want to highlight what you said, Dr. Izzy, the importance of mentorship. I'm privileged to be a part of a mentoring program outside of New York City that was recently developed. And that's exactly what we're doing. We have men from all walks of life who've signed on to this program, raisingblackmen.org, and this mentorship program. And we've all signed on to say, listen, we're going to come alongside African American males and help them in this journey. So yeah.
Thank you both for all of that. I would actually like to take the time to shout out a mentorship program here in Metro Atlanta. You guys have mentioned that it's a very big topic and it's very
Mhm.
prevalent today. Hey Atlanta, it's helping empower youth, and it is a mentorship after school program where they reach out to a lot of boys who just need assistance, and they take them around the community and they do things like fix bikes, work on car
Oh,
parts, mow
oh,
grass, sell water and things of that nature, just to teach them and empower them to have initiative and be self-motivated.
hmm.
So that's a really big up and coming nonprofit that I think that people should support.
Thank you, Jade.
Um, Dr. Izzy, You mentioned earlier how culture and understanding the various cultures that can come from minority communities is very important. How do you feel culture affects mental health?
Huge.
Yes.
It does. It makes a major difference because
Mm-hmm.
usually your culture is your comfort zone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you learn how to pretty much operate in life. Is from your culture because these are your beliefs, these are your customs. All of these things are innate pretty much to you. They're ingrained, okay, because this is your culture. So if you're hearing your culture say, oh, well, you'll be all right. You don't really have any mental health things going on, any real mental health challenges. You can get through that. Just go to the gym, just go work it off, or even in our culture, African American culture, pray about it. Okay. Now, as I'm a strong woman of faith, okay, anyone will tell you, but I understand the importance of integrating faith
So,
with culturally competent interventions and evidence-based practice. Okay. And the reason why I know it works so well is because I use it for myself too.
that's right.
But it plays a major role because again, in African American community, the research tells us that we like support. Okay. We love support. So we will go to our loved ones first. We'll go to an aunt, we'll go to a girlfriend, an uncle, or somebody and talk to them about our challenges and whatever our mental health related things are before we will reach out and seek professional help because we are just support based individuals. We love that. But in addition to that support, we need to have professional support as well as community based support, because many times our loved ones, they just don't have the knowledge. They don't always have the awareness. They don't always have the training. And even our faith-based institutions, they don't always have the clinical-based training that's available to them. Many of them have the ministerial and the pastoral piece,
Right.
but they don't have the clinical piece to integrate, to incorporate it. And I was really blessed on last night to actually do a presentation titled Coping During COVID-19. And I did this in collaboration with a bishop, okay, in a rural area of Georgia, because they were seeing a lot of mental health challenges, not just within his church, but also within the community as a result of COVID-19. And that was one of the things he stressed throughout that presentation. Hear what Dr. Izzard is saying. We must seek professional help. And he said,
Uh,
don't come to me, please don't, because I don't have those tools to assist you. He said, I even have children of my own who struggle with depression and substance use. And I have went out and got this counseling and the professional support for
uh,
them as well as for myself, okay, as a faith leader. So again, culture makes a huge difference
yes, it
because
does.
it's what you've grown up in, it's what's been modeled for you, it's what you hear. And many times you don't want to be the one to step
Mm-hmm.
outside of the box. You don't want to be the one to do something different because you don't want the people in your culture to look at you differently. But again, if you don't step outside of the box, how are you going to know what is truly best and what is the right thing to do?
Absolutely agree. The effect and how culture plays such a significant role in the responses and the decisions that we make. I think about my own context, right? And this is an opportunity to be transparent from three approaches, right? Culture really has helped to shape, how I navigate life, right? I am by heritage, I am a Jamaican kid, right? I was born on the island of Jamaica, left when I was a little kid. Um, but I know in my particular culture, everything is cool, everything Irie, right? Everything no problem, right? You don't talk about what goes on at home. Did you just catch how I just threw that in there? All right,
I
cool.
did.
All right, everything Irie, right? But that's part of the culture. So we don't seek help. We don't seek intervention. So whatever goes on at home stays at home. The second piece of that, where I've been shaped by culture, is of course, as you mentioned, Dr. Izzy, is from a faith experience, right? Growing up in church, as I shared earlier, that's, what set me on this trajectory for mental health. Meaning, growing up in church, we were taught just pray about it, just sing through it, just preach through it. So I've seen the impact it has on churches and faith-based communities, right? And the importance of getting in those communities and creating a safe place, which Dr. Izzy, I'm so glad that you're creating a safe place where faith leaders can send their people, right? Where they understand that, and I love to say this in one of the courses that I developed for NAMI, talks about the faith-based community and mental health. I love to say this, that faith science and psychology does not oppose faith, right? Science and psychology is because of faith, right? And you can insert in there whatever your faith is. So it's so important. I'm so glad that because that's been my passion, is how can we get in the faith-based community and change that culture that says if we just pray about it, we'll be okay, right? And that's not knocking faith, right? Because as you mentioned, we're both people. We're, all of us, we are people of faith. I am deeply rooted. Get me outside of this this Zoom meeting, and you'll catch me in church doing my thing, right? But I've been blessed, and I'll use that word. I've been blessed, and hopefully that's okay for those who are watching. I've been blessed to be able to say, I am a church kid, but I've also now have the experience of integrating evidence-based practices so that we can begin to change the culture that can make spirituality not only a protective factor, but a risk factor. And that sounds so anti-whatever, right? But spirituality and religiosity, we know it's a protective factor, but it can also be a risk factor when there's narratives like, let's just pray about it, right? Let's just meditate about it. We don't need professional help, and we don't need medication. The other thing I'll say on that, and I like to say as we teach about culture, it's important to help particularly the minority culture in two ways, right? Get the narrative out that we want to stop the bleeding of whatever is happening in our communities, right? Whether it's social injustice, whether it's racial tensions, whether it's trauma to urban youth and minority. We want to stop the bleeding. But the other thing I want to highlight is not only should we stop the bleeding, but we ourselves must be careful that we don't bleed into the next generation. Oh, that's pretty heavy right there, right? When we're passing on narratives that say things like, whatever the case is, we're always the ones on the back end of the stick, right? So we want to change the culture by, of course, stopping the bleeding. Let's make sure whatever culture you're in, right, that we don't also pass on our own biases, our own prejudice, and extend the conversation on racism and prejudice by bleeding on the next generation.
Well said.
I agree. Thank you both. The last most prevalent question that I have for you all are, what are your individual opinions on substance abuse and mental health? Because I believe this is something that is a lot more prevalent in today's age than it ever was before.
Absolutely. And that is my background. So I have worked extensively in mental health counseling and substance use counseling. Actually, my dissertation I did on Narcotics Anonymous. So the influence of Narcotics Anonymous on long-term sobriety, family relationships, and career development. So that was one of the reasons why I also fell in love with recovery. And so I love NAMI because NAMI takes more of a recovery-based stand. Right. And I think it's important for us as practitioners to understand recovery as well as treatment, okay? Because they're both a little different. And we need to be able to see it from both perspectives and see how it can still benefit a person. They can benefit from treatment and recovery. But looking at mental health and looking at substance use, one of the things I think is so essential to help individuals understand is that it touches every family. Mental health and substance use, it touches every family. So it's not a such thing as that you can escape it, okay? And so what that means is we all have to come to a place of understanding a little bit more about mental health, a little bit more about substance use, because it is prevalent in all of our families, whether if you see it in your immediate family or you know that it's in your extended family, it is there. Okay. And the more that we can become comfortable enough with saying it, okay, and as well as understanding it, then we can get to a place to where hopefully the people that we love, as well as the people that we work with in service and servant leadership, are willing to take more of a stand about it. And so for me, being the only mental health professional in my family, God bless me, making sure that I help my loved ones when they start to
Yes.
talk about a particular family member, helping them to understand, do you realize that even though this family member has not sought treatment, that this family member has a mental health challenge?
That's it.
This family member has a substance use addiction. This is a mental health challenge that needs treatment.
That's it.
Whether they choose to get the treatment or go through recovery or not, it is prevalent and it is here. So that's one of the responsibilities that I take as a mental health professional within my family, and the stand that I take so that they can keep hearing it
Yes.
more and more. And many times I kind of wait around to see what they're going to say in the days and the weeks to come when they get
Mm.
ready to talk about this particular family member again. Some of them catch on, and some of the others, they'll say, well, yeah, you're right, but they still have difficulty saying it. That lets you know how deep the stigma still is rooted in African
Yes.
American communities. And Dr. Cassell says, he's from Jamaica, but I'm just a Southern girl, from North Carolina and then now being in Georgia. But again, Southern culture. We have
Yes.
our
Yes.
own culture, you know, as African Americans as well. And like I said, that's one of the things, though, that stands out. They don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to speak it out. They'll say something, oh, well, this person keeps drinking, and this person keeps doing this, or this person keeps, snapping our head off, not realizing the person may very well be dealing with bipolar, okay, or something else, but they don't necessarily want to say it because they feel like if they say it, that makes it more real. And so
Wow.
for us as mental health professionals, individuals that understand mental health, we have to then take that responsibility so that they then know this exists. Okay.
Wow.
Well
Good.
said.
And as it relates to substance use and mental health conditions, I rely on um, professionals like Dr. Izzy, who that's your area of expertise, because that's one of the things in our field. We recognize our area of expertise and passion, but what I've learned in working in a primary care setting prior to moving here from New York, I worked in a primary care setting where we did collaborative care, which is quite unique. You would see your primary care professional, and then you would see someone from the mental health team like myself. But one of the things I learned is the importance of integrated treatment. So when we talk about substance use and mental health, and both co-occurring, right? One of the things we've learned is that so often people will treat one aspect, whether they treat the substance abuse or they'll treat the mental health condition, but it's important to integrate both in your treatment process, right? So that you're treating both substance use and the mental health condition, because we know this, right? One might be feeding the other, right? And that's why it's co-occurring, right? One might be as a result of the other. So I just wanted to highlight that as we talk about substance use and mental health conditions, and they both co-occurring, it is so important that we don't separate the two, right? We want to find treatment programs and treatment interventions that will treat both at the same time. Because the question is often asked to me as a clinician, what should we treat first? What should we deal with first? And my response is we treat both at the same time because they could be feeding each other. And then I want to, again, this word of stigma keeps coming up, right? Because that's what we're doing with programs like this. We are reducing and destigmatizing, right, what's happening with mental health. And I like to say it this way: when it comes to a medical condition, we will empathize with the person, blame the sickness, and say, go get treatment. But when it comes to a mental health condition, we will stigmatize the person, right? We will blame the person, and we don't advocate for treatment. Let's begin to change that conversation. Let's change that narrative. Both need to be addressed, both need to be treated.
Thank you very much. This was amazing. Thank you both for coming and giving us this insight on mental health and minority communities. I know that I'm taking away a lot of information from this forum today, and I'm truly sure that our audience will be taking away the same notes. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to NAMI Georgia, to our hotline. And if you want to speak to in either of these amazing professionals, we'll be happy to connect you with them as well. Thank you for joining us to support NAMIWalks Your Way, Georgia. As you can see, ridding the stigma behind mental health and just making everyone aware that it is okay and you are not alone is very important. We are here as a family, and we hope that you all will join the mission in supporting by advocacy, education, and just helping anyone in need.
Congratulations on completing this year's virtual NAMI Walks. This year, I've been in awe at the strength you've all displayed, the community you've built, and the impact you've made. It takes a fighter's spirit to go out and ask people for donations when funds are scarce, and the need for mental health care is only growing. As we close out this year's walk and Mental Illness Awareness Week, I would like to remind you all of the importance of the work you do and how much it is appreciated. I always leave this event inspired and invigorated to achieve mental health for all. We believe mental health care is a right, and it is not right for anyone to be left out. Thank you to the staff, volunteers, and supporters of NAMI state organizations and affiliates. We cannot do this important work without you. Congratulations on your walk, and see you next year.